There you
Hi,
go.
Sam. Nice to see you again.
Hi, Stephen.
And this is going to be about a 30-minute session.
Mhm.
What I'd like to do actually is start with your background, basically. Well, let's start with what you do now, your background, and then your aspirations for the future. You're one of the few people that are actually excited by the opportunities created by the pandemic. So each of the chapters that I'm doing is related to a particular theme. And your one, you'll be pleased to know, is what to do in a crisis.
Okay.
Okay, because I think you've been an expert on that. So can we just start with, and then move on if you want, or I can remind you, what you're doing now, how you got there, and what the opportunities are for the future. And finally, what advice would you give for a budding entrepreneur?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm the owner and director of a business called New Forest Activities. It's an outdoor activity provider based, surprisingly, in the New Forest, which is it's been my home for most of my life. And we effectively adapt outdoor experiences, so canoeing, kayaking, ropes course. We've got like a laser tag element to it as well. And what we do is we take those activities and we adapt them to what the clients need and what they want. So the clients could be mums looking for a birthday party idea for their youngsters. It could be a family looking to escape modern life and spend some time in some canoes out in the forest. Or it could be a business team looking to experience something a bit different, sort of team building really, but maybe with a desire to kind of learn a bit about themselves as well as having some fun. I set this business up, 2010, I guess it became a limited company, but actually my history of doing this goes a lot further back. So back in 2003, I started a business called Liquid Logistics. I was and still am passionate about paddle sports, particularly whitewater kayaking. If the New Forest was blessed with mountains and rivers, I'd be out a lot more often than I am nowadays. But certainly when I was younger, I used to travel the UK and further afield to quench my passion for whitewater rivers. And Liquid Logistics was kind of born off that passion because I wanted to get other people involved in the sport. The New Forest, being my home, had a resource that was being not used, which was the Bewley River. So we approached them and said, "Hey, can't take people whitewater kayaking just yet because they're not qualified, but we can take them out on a river." And the degree course that I just completed, I'd met a great friend, Richard, and myself and Rich set up this paddle sport business, which evolved over time into New Forest Activities because we started to work with youth projects, business teams, and actually there was a demand for, you do the water sports stuff, Sam, but can you do anything on the land? So we had an archery range, and then we did some problem solving, team challenges. We used to rent other activity centres for some of the residential elements of our Princess Trust programs. And it just seemed almost natural and organic to kind of grow the business and then effectively rebrand it once we became greater than a canoe and kayaking company. Liquid Logistics still exists as a brand. We take people sea kayaking. We take people from sort of beginner level up to intermediate. Really help them to get the skills to be self-sufficient so they can then join a club and do these things themselves. And then I guess pre-pandemic, so, going back to, I guess, March 2020, New Forest Activities was at a point where it was relatively self-sufficient. So I had an office manager, a senior instructor, a chap doing my marketing, and we had developed the systems and processes. So effectively for me as a director, I was able to kind of coach and guide that team rather than having to be there to do, it's that kind of who, not how. I was basically outsourced the primary roles of the business. And that had allowed me to begin a new journey, which was to move into kind of helping other business owners, other entrepreneurs, and effectively become a coach, which is kind of, I think I've been putting that off. I've always wanted to add greater value, and I've got scribblings from 10 years ago where I was looking at building a personal development course and building a mindfulness program, and all these kind of things. And I kind of thought, oh no, who's going to listen to me? Very much an imposter syndrome, and it still persists a little bit as well. I've still got issues around that, but so effectively I was all set to become a coach. I've branded a business, train for the future, and just as I was about to kind of launch that, coronavirus hit, and I found myself very much needing to go back to New Forest activities to help that business effectively come through this, because, you know, having to shut for a few months and losing a great amount of revenue is a challenge that needs to be addressed, and I can't just leave that to my team, really. So as we move out of lockdown now, I'm got a bit of a balancing act between coaching and supporting and working with my team at New Forest activities, and looking to grow my coaching network and my influence, and, you know, produce resources that are going to help others.
Okay.
So that, I guess that's who and what.
Yes,
yeah.
That's who and what. And then, as I said, the main issue for this particular talk is how you dealt with the pandemic. I think it would be fair to say, probably, and I'm putting words in your mouth here, that probably at first it was a bit of a shock, but then you actually grasped the nettle by the horns. And I've been looking at your Facebook group, maybe talk a little bit about that, and just generally how you have seized the opportunity to develop new ideas because of this crisis. So it's really about how you deal with a crisis in business.
I mean, ultimately for me, it's about practicing what you preach. You know, I've been obsessed with personal development since I was in my teens, you know, reading the Tony Robbins books when I was kind of 18, 19, and I did an NLP practitioner program, again, right back at the start. And I was using ropes courses to talk executives through stressful situations. You know, they've got these guys at the top of a trapeze pole or top of a telegraph pole, 40 foot in the air. And here was me, an 18, 19-year-old, coaching them through that process of being stressed. And one of the really big lessons that I train my staff to put out now when they run the youth projects we do with the Prince's Trust is, there's two types of things in this world. There's things that you can change and there's things that you can't change. All right. And when there's something that you can't change going on, it's very easy to get sucked in and be a victim almost, and feel that it's not fair. Why is this happening to me? And effectively get locked in a cycle where it's not your fault and it's not fair. And the coronavirus, none of us can change that, what was happening in the background. Like, the environment is the environment. It's, you know, it's unchangeable, but what we can change is our attitude to it, and the way that we act and the way that we behave and the mindset to it. And it was like, Sam, you've got to practice what you preach now. You know, it's all right having all these kind of ideas and mantras and how to live your best life kind of ideals when it's, you know, all plain sailing. It's when it actually gets tough that it matters. So I've very much been digging deep and, you know, both internally and projecting outwards, trying to show that I do practice what I preach. And one of my first posts quite soon after coronavirus was about like how this is a team building event now. You know, what team building events are is we take a business team out of their comfort zone and we put them in a new environment. And that new environment, we then create challenges by getting them to paddle a certain distance or solving a problem in the woodlands or whatever it is. And the reason that we do that is to create stress and to create anxiety, not so much anxiety, but effectively to create a dynamic where their true selves kind of come out. You know, who's the natural leaders, who are the people that are going to question stuff, who are the ones that are going to sit back and absorb, who are the kind of go-getters that get out there and maybe talk over others and don't, you know, that caricature. When there's a crisis, when there's a challenge, people's true selves come out, and the outdoor activities are actually about the reflection, because what you'll get in a half day of team building might take months to come out in an office environment, because it magnifies who people are and how they react, how they respond. And for me, it was like, this coronavirus is a global challenge. It's a team building challenge for all of us. We are going to see people's true colors now. We're going to see businesses' true colors, you know, and that's how it played out. You know, there were some very high profile businesses that got a lot of flack because they were doing things wrong, and they were saying, we're going to stay open regardless, and we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And there were businesses that did the right thing and you know, pivoted even and changed their products so they could continue to serve. So that was the mindset that I went into this with. And, you know, and I saw, I'm attached to a few business networks and some interesting kind of growth networks as well. So I've not done this alone. You know, I think that's really important to say. It's not about me having something that's different. It's I've attached myself and I ensure that the information that comes into me is positive. That idea that you're the total of the five people that you spend time with. So I make sure that I'm in networks of positivity and I'm in networks of you know, forward thinking. And actually one of those communities is the abundance community. And they're having a whale of a time right now because this is tech entrepreneurs and people that invest and operate businesses in healthcare, in AI, in, you know, web conferencing softwares, and actually the amount of money that's currently being pumped into R&D for medicine and healthcare, the amount of money that's being pumped into network infrastructure and teleconferencing and remote working and, you know, software as a service, all that stuff. And there's you know, there's a real kind of buzz in that community. So I've just surrounded myself with that, and I thought, well, how can I apply this to New Forest activities? How can I apply it to Train for the Future? And how can I be a vehicle to help push that out? So I set up a Facebook group to try and help other business owners. I tapped into my entrepreneur circle as an organization that I kind of coach for, and I've got access to all their resources. And the chap there, Nigel, that runs that, produced a really useful resource for dealing with the pandemic that talked about show leadership, get in video, tell people what you're doing, be honest, you know, and how to get the right funding, because, you know, we are very, very fortunate. You know, gratitude is a core thing and a core attitude that we all need to cultivate. And I am massively grateful that I live in a country where we have the resources to provide the funding that came to businesses. I mean, this furlough scheme, there was grant funding. I mean, you know, what's happening in other parts of the world where they haven't got that social support network is terrible. I mean, I read an article, again, it's not all negativity, I try all positivity, but, you know, the street children of India you know, are literally starving because they can't make the scraps that they make every day by looking after the people that are moving around, because no one's moving around. And it's like, you know, so how can I, in the developed world, be anything other than grateful? And how can I do anything other than move forward with what I've got? Because I'm not, you know, I've still got a house, I've still got a family, I've still got food on my plate. And yes, we've lost a ridiculous and a huge amount of income, but my core needs are met and I can still serve others. So, you know, I want to look after my staff and I want to look after my family. And the government, you know, there's obviously both sides to things they're doing well and things they aren't doing well. I mean, that's the yin and yang of how the universe works, but there is a lot of stuff that's really helped business owners. And
what about if you've been laid off of your work or fired, and for the first time you're thinking of starting a business? What advice would you give such a person? And also, you mentioned in your own group the business loan scheme. Would that be applicable if you're starting a business from scratch?
I think if you're starting from total scratch, the C-bills and the bounce back loans aren't, you have to have a registered business. You have to have some sort of trading record because they calculate it based on your previous year turnover. Sure. However, there's the Innovate funding pot, and there are another. Well, I mean, I've spoken to a chap recently who advises on this, and he gave me 3 or 4 pages of A4 of grant funding and pots that I could apply for, and some of those would be relevant for startups, because if you're a business that is doing something to help with coronavirus and COVID-19, there is a lot of funding available.
But what if you are just somebody who was working, obviously, for a big company, they've been laid off and they don't know what to do, but they have the urge to go into business? The thing that I do dwell on is I don't think everybody is suited to start their own business. So I think that's a point. How would you know whether you're suited? What would you do? to start? What's your main advice?
It's a very good point, because there is, the idea of being an entrepreneur has almost got fashionable. The idea that anybody can set up a drop shipping company, or anybody can set up a quick fire. And the problem is there's a lot of people selling that idea, and a lot of people buy it. And they spend, sometimes 4-figure sums of money on this course and that course that's going to propel them to instant riches. But it's always in the small print. We do not guarantee these results. These results require hard work, dedication, sleepless nights, passion, and a real desire to serve. And it's very easy for these gurus to show examples of people that have made it, because people do make it. But it's not for everyone, because it does require a certain mindset, and execution is the key. Anybody can have ideas. Ideas don't make a man, and ideas don't make a business. It's the execution which is important. And no matter how many courses you pay for and buy into, unless you're actually going to execute on those ideas, it's not going to work. So entrepreneurism is viable. I would say that anybody could do it, but only a few will, because they've got to have that thing. You've got to be able to take the knockbacks. You've got to be prepared to fail. Fail fast, fail often. That's the sort of, I think, anybody that's really successful will have failed. I mean, I'm probably off the top of my head, there's, multiple Hollywood actors that knocks on hundreds of doors before they got the yes. Anyone that's successful in business will have multiple failures behind them. They're just prepared to keep going. And I think a lot of people just, it's not work. They get hit, or they get a negative comment on social media, and then suddenly the world falls apart and they don't execute again. And there are, entrepreneurism isn't for everyone. My advice would be, I was very fortunate in the fact that when I started my journey, I had no commitments whatsoever. Literally off the back of university, my mum and dad let me crash in a spare room at their back of their house for, a year or so while I set the business up. And I didn't have a day off for like 2 years. But I didn't see it as work. I saw it as play, because I had some canoes and I was taking people out canoeing. It's like, that's not work, eh? So, but we just didn't take time off. We just did it constantly every day. And that's a lot. If you're, you've left the job where you were doing a nice, comfortable 9 to 5 and getting a decent wage, and are you going to be prepared to work that hard for not very much money to make it stick? And I would always sort of suggest to people is, you can turn your passion into income, but it's not going to happen overnight. And you want to do it as a sideshow. You want to do it alongside something that is paying the bills, something that is covering what your family needs, or covering your mortgage, whether that's, if you've left, let's say you're a graphic designer, you've just been laid off, right? There are now multiple cloud systems and places you can put yourself on Upwork, on Elance, and you could offer your services as a freelancer. Get yourself 20 hours a week, enough to pay the bills, cover your survival, make sure you're sorted. And then your new business, the passion, the bit you want to actually do, you can do on the side. Mm-hmm. Because then you will realize whether you want to do it or not. Because I think, for me, I'm sure you've come across the E-myth, but that idea that I am a paddle sport coach and I love paddling. I had to be very careful not to kill that paddle, not kill that passion by turning it into a job and having it work. And it was quite close to doing that, to be honest. When you've paddled and taken people out 6 hours a day, are you really then going to do it for yourself off the back of it? And I think people often find that the illusion is that, they've got this passion. I'm going to turn it into a business, and then suddenly their passion becomes work, and it's harder to be engaged now. And, they might, my wife set up as a yoga instructor, and that was, love yoga. I want to help other mums. And, for her, she found that it became a little bit of a chore, because I had to work hard to get people in, and then I've got to pay the venue, and, we had that with whitewater kayaking. We started doing whitewater kayaking trips, and myself and Rich looked at each other and said, we've dragged all these people up to Scotland. They've had a great time. We've had a good time, but we haven't made much money out of this. We could have just gone ourselves and paddled harder rivers, and because what we make back on Beaulieu River with the beginners is to a 10 multiple of what we're going to make dragging people around the country doing whitewater. So there is a word of caution there. When you're turning your passion into work, do it for the right reasons. Don't do it just because it seems like a good idea, because you might be better off just taking a highly paid job to buy the free time that you need to live out your passion. I hope that answers the sort of question there.
Very coherently, thank you. And my wife being a yoga teacher, she's qigong now, but whatever, I can relate to it. So finally, and thank you, I think you've been very helpful. Finally, and I'm just interested, what's your aspirations for your future and for the future of your business?
Good question. So I've got three kind of real passions when it comes to learning and knowledge and growing, and I want to build my business effectively around the framework of two of those passions. So one is an interest in future technology. I'm very much hooked into, like I said, the abundance community, and these are a group of people, and some of them are very successful businessmen and women, and their belief is that technology is growing at an exponential rate. So the acceleration, when I was a kid, we didn't really even have computers, but we had this thing that was a big box and you could do word processing on it. Now 3 decades from that, I've literally got a supercomputer in my pocket. And I'm connected to everybody, half the global population, soon to be potentially the rest of them in the next 5 years. And the rate of change is growing at an exponential rate. So what's going to happen in the next 10 years is going to be equivalent to the last 50. And the books and the resources that I'm reading, there are multiple .com opportunities waiting for the person to find them now. AI, VR, if you look at Facebook and Google, they didn't exist 15 years ago, and now they're the biggest businesses on the face of the earth. There are opportunities like that there for people to pick up on. So I want to, with Train for the Future, the idea is to show people and give them opportunity to tap into that mindset, first of all, of being on the exponential, get a business that's set up to scale at an exponential rate, and to leverage it myself with my own ideas and with my own businesses. So I'm currently building a VR, I've got a VR virtual reality project that is going to be a team building and training tool, which I'm looking for some funding, and we're currently going for some R&D on that. I'm looking at how I can build technology into the processes that run New Forest activities. It's physical activity, more spare time, learning from doing stuff is going to continue into the future, but there's going to be opportunities to apply exponential tech to that business. And I'm really quite keen to support startups in that space as well. So my kind of training and coaching is very much aimed at people that are future focused and thinking forward. However, and this is the big caveat to this, my second passion is around effectively mindfulness, enlightenment, and a study and an attempt to practice Zen. And one of my favorite philosophers, a chap called Alan Watts, that I'm sure you've come across, would say that there's no point making any plans for the future if you're unable to live in the present. Because no matter how great the future is, and no matter how great an experience you create within yourself, it's transient, it just passes. And if you aren't able to live now and be happy now and be grateful now and content and kind in the present, then no future is going to help you, because you're always going to be looking for the next thing. So it's really important, although I've got that exponential and growth mindset, it needs to be grounded now. Because no matter how high the highs or how low the lows, they're just a moment in time, and they pass. So I am really passionate that people appreciate that, and they are grateful. They are passionate. I mean, I've got these 4 core attitudes really, that I try and cultivate in myself and help others to. And really, I wouldn't want to work with people that didn't. The first one is gratitude. As we've said, you know, gratitude is based on what has happened and what we have, not a future thing. And be grateful for the meal I had last night, the roof over my head, the fact that I'm healthy and able to speak to you now is, you know, just 3 things that I can be deeply grateful for. Passion for what you're doing is another attitude to cultivate. You know, it's really, really important that you are passionate about what you do. You can have somebody that is a cleaner in a hospital, passionate about their role, because they don't see themselves as a cleaner. They're someone that talks to and helps the patients. Mm-hmm. You know, that's someone in a role that society might deem menial. But actually it's very important because it's the talking and the conversation they have with the patients that are there. And, you know, whatever you do, passion is key to that. The third attitude is responsibility. So act as if everything that happens to you, you are responsible for. You know, what comes back at you, you are responsible for. And it's an act as if. It's not saying that that's objectively true. I am just acting as if, and then I'm going to respond as though I create my own reality. I create the things that happen to me. I'm responsible for how people react, respond, how I react and respond. And we would go down a whole free will discussion, and maybe we should do that another time. But you know, but I act as if I'm responsible. Yes. You know, regardless of what's driving the behaviours. And then, so those are the 3 passions that are kind of inwardly cultivated. And the final one is outward, and that's kindness. You know, in what I do, everything I do should come from a place and a want to show kindness to the world. And, you know, and if someone comes at you aggressively and, you know, challenging or whatever, if you put kindness back at them, it's very hard for them to remain angry. And, you know, just to be kind and appreciate that if you were in that person's shoes, right, if you'd had their entire backstory and their entire life experiences, would you have done anything different? Could you have done anything different? Yeah. And I think the answer is like, well, no, you probably wouldn't. You know, if you'd had their parents and their background and their experience of life, possibly you would be doing what they're doing. So show some kindness. And those 4 attitudes are, I pay attention to them. So I use mindfulness to observe myself. And that's why mindfulness is the overall tool. It's like the all-seeing eye that observes your behaviors. So if I catch myself in a state where I'm angry or stressed or anxious, if I could just observe and say, well, are you showing one of the 4 attitudes now, Sam? Are you taking responsibility for this situation? Are you being passionate? Are you grateful for what you have? And are you showing kindness? It's the practice of meditation. It's the practice of mindfulness that allows you to catch yourself, which is why the 4 attitudes are the core, but the real secret sauce is that ability to observe your acting them out. Because we're all human. We all get angry, or we all get emotional, because that's what energy moving, isn't it? We are emotional creatures. But mindfulness practice allows you to catch yourself and go, how long am I going to choose to be angry for? You know, isn't it interesting that that person triggered that emotion, or that situation triggered that emotion? And you can, through practice, get that down from being angry for an hour to maybe 30 minutes. And maybe if you get really good at it, you can catch yourself in the moment, and maybe you can just be angry for just a few moments and then let it go. And we're all practicing, aren't we, at that art? And that, you know, that's the technique. So I know I went a bit off of one there, but that's how I like to kind of live my life, really.
That's lovely. And actually, I think it's a great place to end, because I think you've given some fantastic guidelines for people that are interested not only in business but also in managing their own lives. Thank you. So I'm going to turn off the recording now.